Hello, Internet world, and welcome to Binge Theory, a podcast that was created by a couple of friends who enjoyed water cooler talk about entertainment so much, we decided to make a podcast out of it, because if we love it, someone else has to as well. We are grateful for any new and legacy listeners joining us today. We know there are thousands of podcasts out there, so appreciate you taking the time to choose us. Today, with us, we have
Julian.
Tan.
And I am Kyle, and I'm excited about today's episode because it's one of my favorite topics to talk about at the cooler. It is Marvel versus DC. And so just to clarify today, we're talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies versus the DC Extended Universe movies. We might actually dabble into some other things as well, but I'm definitely excited to kind of talk a comparison between the two. So what do you guys think? Do you guys have a favorite, Marvel or DC?
Well, and first of all, I wanted to set some ground rules because we did talk a little earlier about acknowledging Christopher Nolan's films as part of the DC universe. Do we feel comfortable with that, or do we want to keep it strictly
extended universe? I think
so.
So if we do talk Nolan, that is like totally like a different thing. I feel like to include that into it, it wouldn't be fair to Marvel because
the Nolan trilogy was like the best of any hero movies I've seen in a while.
It does throw off the metrics.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we talk about the Marvel MCU and then DCEU, and then we even talk about that as a kind of a side thing, like other movies that are outside of that universe.
And I think Joker's outside of that universe.
It is outside of the universe.
So I love it. All right, so let me go first because I got way too much movie trivia in my head and opinions as well. Obviously, if you've listened to the podcast in the past, you know that my affinity for Marvel supersedes DC. Again, excluding the more recent ones, the Nolans and the Jokers, I think that Marvel, in 10 years, has done something that no other cinematic universe has done or could do, even though they're trying and failing. The entire premise of putting together an entire universe based off of a low-tier superhero, if you will. Because, again, Iron Man was not a household name, and Robert Downey Jr. was far from an A-list celebrity at the time. So being able to build an entire multi-billion-dollar universe off of a guy fresh out of rehab in a iron suit, I think is phenomenal. It's lightning in a bottle, and they rode it all the way to the bank.
Absolutely. How about you, Tim?
I don't know. I do really love the Marvel movies. I would say that like I'm not the and this is like gonna be my criticism is that they aren't necessarily film, but they're definitely movies. And in that aspect, I do like they are really fun like things to sit down and watch. Like the Endgame and Infinity War was like something that we've never seen before. It's a culmination of what you said, like 10 years of just all this, like all these different storylines building up. And you like I said, like we've never had a movie going experience like this before. And for that reason, like Marvel definitely has something interesting going on.
It's almost like a new genre of superhero.
Yeah, I don't mean to like steal this away and change the conversation at all, but have you guys seen the new trailer for Morbius where
Leto,
not Leto, but
Jared Leto.
Yeah, it is Jared Leto, but the Vulture is at the end of the trailer. Michael Keaton's at the end of the trailer. So it's a Sony movie, but now they're bringing in stuff from the MCU.
But technically that's still Sony. I mean, because that was...
Right,
yeah,
so... and that's
Homecoming.
like a very interesting like thing, too, is that Spider-Man is technically still a Sony property, but they're like, you guys can use him every once in a while, and we'll be a little nitpicky about what we decide to use from that.
Well, and I think Tom Holland has like one more Marvel contract.
Yeah.
But the rest is all Sony. I know that... Well, again, Sony would be stupid not to try and, capitalize on the success of the Tom Holland Spider-Man. And I saw also in the trailer there was a poster, and I think that was the Spider-Man from, I'm not joking, the Tony Maguire universe.
So actually, some sleuthy fans figured out that it is from the new Spider-Man game that came out recently. That poster is Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man suit, but you can change to that suit in the game and that's the exact pose that he does when he changes into that suit. So that's a very interesting, it's uniquely the PS4 Spider-Man game.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how they're tying all that in, but I guess I want to hear, Kyle, your thoughts on DC versus Marvel, and which you're leaning toward.
Yeah, I think what Tan said is absolutely right. I mean, it's a completely different. You said it right. It's Marvel is an experience. Like when you're watching a Marvel movie, it's an experience. Whereas it's not a necessarily film, because you go watch other movies and you're there to kind of take a lot of content in, as opposed to you're enjoying this entire experience that they're putting together. If it hasn't been blatantly obvious from every previous podcast we've done, I'm definitely a Marvel fan. I actually do love DC. I just don't. I think what DC has done is they're trying to play catch up, which I think they've kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit. They had a lot of great opportunities to kind of really change some things out. I mean, and there's some great movies. Honestly, Wonder Woman is one of my favorite DCEU movies that's been out so far, as well as we were talking about how we're not counting, but the Nolan trilogies are absolutely incredible, and no doubt about it, Dark Knight is one of the best superhero movies that's ever been created of all time. But on my end, I definitely think that there's something. I think Julian, you said it one time where they're doing something. There's just something right. They've got the mixture right. They made the Powerpuff Girls kind of thing. Everything just happened to work out together, and they really have a really good formula right now. And it's so cool because even right now, we're kind of holding off for the next phase of the Marvel universe, and everyone is so antsy and anticipating what's going to happen. There's so much talk about what's happening, what's going to happen next, and so everyone's trying to figure out where they can fill in whatever their they need their dopamine hit of Marvel to actually to make them happy. But yeah, I mean, as far as on my end, I mean, I think it's it's interesting because we're looking at a bunch of the movies now on the screen, and I'm just thinking, man, there's so many great just standalone movies. Even if they weren't part of a universe, they're just great standalone movies. You look at Thor Ragnarok, that's an incredible standalone movie.
Taika again brought a whole new dimension to superhero films. Yeah. I mean, but also I would say, and first of all, if you don't mind me chiming in, I want to what you said in regards to the DC formula and the strategy and the game plan. I think one of the things that DC did when they shot themselves in the foot were they were creating so-so movies with iconic characters, and Marvel was creating phenomenal movies with so-so characters because nobody really knew the Marvel universe other than Spider-Man and the A-listers. But if you start off with like I was saying, Thor is good, but he didn't have a fan base like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. And quite frankly, there's a whole generation that grew up with Justice League and Super Friends. So that was basically the benchmark. Everything was Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and to a lesser extent Aquaman, and The Flash. And everything else was kind of like a cousin to that. But it was never really crafted well, and I think I mentioned this on one of our podcasts in the past, that I think that's because everybody had an opinion. Everybody had their interpretation of Batman, their interpretation of Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. And you have all those pots, all those chefs, throwing their thoughts into the pot. And I think it just spoiled the overall outcome of these films. But again, with Marvel, they had no expectations. They were saying, hey, here's a character that we have a license to. Let's just make a really good story. And if you approach it by trying to make a good story instead of trying to capitalize on a well-known character, I think you're bound for success because you can only win. Nobody's going to care if you mess up Guardians of the Galaxy right out of the gate because they don't care who that is. But now, I mean, they're literally throwing money hand over fist at a gun just so we'll direct Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And has anybody heard? Is that still on?
Mm-hmm.
It is? Okay.
It's going to be a Guardians movie and a Thor movie. He'll be a part
As
of
Guardians of the Galaxy.
it. Yeah, he'll be a part of that movie.
Is that the one? Because don't forget, they're also doing
Thor: Love and Thunder.
which is another Taika Waititi.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Taika Waititi and how...
He's directing a Star Wars movie.
There you go.
Or rumored to be in talks. And if he's
Exactly.
doing the next trilogy of Star Wars movies, that'd be pretty cool.
I hope he just directs the rest of Mando season 2. Like, I hope he does all season 2 of Mandalorian. I would love that.
You know what, Taika, has the balance of just action and comedy and timing. And I've always said it that anybody who can do comedy can write anything because it's all about timing, setting expectations, and then delivering the punchline. And that's why I think they also do great dramas. And to point on that, if we're just going to go into the darker stuff, Joker, was done by Todd Phillips, notoriously famous for Old School,
Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky and Hutch, of course, the Hangover trilogy, and all that is coming from a comedic mind, whereas it was not done by a committee. People weren't saying, well, this is what I think the Joker is. Yeah, you had that to a lesser extent with Heath Ledger, but I think nobody got a firm grasp on a psychotic mind and how to really portray that. And when he took it to the late 80s, that was, again, I had trepidations of it because I said, oh, please don't let this be a ripoff of Taxi Driver, Mean Streets, and King of Comedy. It definitely used a lot of that DNA, but Joaquin saved it. And because he was on screen for 90% of the film, that's what you're focused on. Not so much the storyline, but just his interpretation of a man who's spiraling out of control mentally. And again, you're not going to get that in DC Extended Universe proper. They're not going to allow you to do that. They're almost in the Disney trap to a lesser extent with the last Star Wars trilogy, where they have to check certain boxes to appease certain fans to get those butts and seats. But I'll just make it the new catchphrase is, if you have no expectations, you have nothing but success in front of you. And I think that's going from these boy band type movies they've been trying to put out, Justice League and all that, which was horribly orchestrated. They should go to just the solos. And that's why Wonder Woman was more of a success. Joker was a success. And I think, if they come out with another indie, it's going to be darker in that subject matter as well. And we were talking about Morbius too. And this is almost counterintuitive because the same thing with Venom is what I see with Morbius. It's very 1990s special effects. It does not blow me away one bit. I know probably everything that's going to happen before the end of this film, but it's probably going to make money, and it could just be the marketing and the fact that people have again, it's all branding. Marvel has the branding, even though Sony's siphoning off on a little bit. I think Marvel has that cachet where you're going to see it. Because again, maybe I'm wrong, and I'll put it out there. What did you guys think of Venom? Did you think it was well crafted? It was obviously a success, but do you think it garnered that success based on how it was put together and Tom Hardy's performance?
I have never seen Venom.
Okay. Well then. So it's actually kind of interesting because I saw Venom recently, actually not that long ago, and I actually thought, so one, Tom Hardy saved that entire movie. Like, he was that movie, first off. And something I've noticed, because we always talk about things that DC does wrong with their movies, and I realized that the thing that Marvel can do wrong sometimes, and it really determines how well the movie performs, is they can really hire really great characters, protagonists, but when they get poor antagonists, their movies don't do as well. And I think that's something that DC also does. And that's probably the reason why DC has such a hard time, because a lot of their antagonists aren't very good. But then you think about all the antagonists for the Marvel universe. You look at Thanos, Mysterio, Killmonger. I'm looking through all of it.
Oh, even to a lesser extent, in Civil War, Zemo.
Zemo?
Yeah.
But he's even got depth and character, right? You look at Winter Soldier, like all those are some of the better Marvel movies.
Vulture's
pretty solid.
Exactly.
So I think the better they are at selecting villains and how they hire for villains and people like that, the better they are doing that, casting for that, I think the better the movies go. And I think that is an issue with DC, because you think about the DC movies that are great are the ones that have really, really great protagonists and antagonists. Like you think about the Dark Knight trilogy, right? Those villains are all phenomenal.
Well, yeah, and definitely. What's funny is I have a friend that he would always bust my chops because, I mean, I love the first Christopher Nolan Dark. It's just Batman, right?
Batman Begins.
Batman Begins, yeah. And I loved it because, it was, a grounded level Batman. It was plausible, scientifically, accurate, for lack of a better term. And then Dark Knight comes out. And that became my new favorite. And he was like, well, no, you said Batman Begins was your favorite. I was like, yeah, but it's like a Kardashian. You see one, you're like, okay. Then you see another one, and you're like, hey, now this is my favorite. And again, that's a horribly sexist comment, but I was upgrading on the Nolan. Didn't like Dark Knight Rises as much.
You didn't like Bane?
I like Bane.
I just didn't like that movie as much.
I mean, it was fine, but when you get into taking over a city hostage and, there's just no sort of military, counteraction other than just standing on the bridge, and it lost the plausibility when you do something that big. And I think that always goes to scale. If you do something like Joker, where it's basically just some guy running the streets, or even Winter Soldier, where it's ground level. It's not military, and because if you have the U.S. military, stuff's going to happen. But they took over what was essentially Manhattan, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
They just said, "Oh well, we better not go in because there's a bomb." No, you're going to go in. You're not just going to, I guess, negotiate with terrorists would be the best way to phrase it. And that being said, I loved the Nolan series, and you're right. Bane was a good antagonist, but Joker was probably the best of all three of those.
And I think this is the other thing too, right? Like, I think the reason that plays such a big part is because as an antagonist, you can have more depth in character. It's very much like, what are your motivations? Whereas like a protagonist, it's pretty cut and dry for the most part, right? Like Robert Downey Jr.'s it's always changing, but it usually is about him. Like, what can I do to be better and whatever. And in Endgame, it was about, what can I do for my kids, like my family. Captain America, he's a soldier, he fights for America. Like, it's like pretty cut and dry. And it's interesting how they kind of start to shift them towards more of the gray side. But then with antagonists, it's almost like, what are their like motivations to do this? And so like my favorite, again, is still one of my favorite villains is Killmonger. Like his motivations as the antagonist, you almost start to say, well, I guess he wasn't really that bad. Like I understood why, but he wasn't really like, the way he did it was wrong. But he had the right intentions for his part.
And to that point, I'm going to put him and Thanos in the same conversation because there's an old expression that every villain is the hero of their own story. And I would say that, Killmonger, and I know this was used in describing the old days of Xavier and Magneto, is that was basically an allegory for Dr. King and Malcolm X, exactly, because they both wanted, their race, for lack of a better term, to survive and prosper. One just had an idea of using force to make it happen, and the other one had an idea of changing hearts and minds. And Killmonger was obviously about force, as was Thanos. So it's not like the old days of Lex Luthor, where I just want to take over the world and I want all the money. It's more nuanced, and that, you're right, gives a much more interesting antagonist if you have an understanding of their motivations. Not always, because sometimes you'll have prequels that will tell you why somebody's the way they are, and I'm not crazy about that. Not to go too off on the deep end here, but I remember when I saw Hannibal Rising.
Okay.
And it was, obviously Hannibal Lecter from the Silence of the Lambs universe, I guess you can call it. So there are like 5 of those films. And the first one, Hannibal Lecter was just a monster. And he was a clever monster, very charming, but a monster. You did not know what he was thinking. Very much like Joker, But then I think 3 movies in, they had Hannibal Rising, where you see him as a child and how he was treated, and that made him Hannibal the Cannibal. So I didn't really appreciate that because the mystery sometimes is what sells the overall story.
Yeah.
And it's, like if I saw, and here's an interesting comparison, if I saw a baby shark being raised, and I'm not trying to start singing Baby Shark, but if I saw Baby Shark, being raised in a tank, being flushed down a toilet, and going out to sea, and then growing up and turning into Jaws, I may not have as much horror when I see Jaws, ripping people apart.
Yeah.
Because you have, empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You have an understanding, which I guess that's what empathy is.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, it comes back to how well they cast for that and how well they tell the story. That's probably the reason why Dark Knight is so good, because nobody knows Joker's intentions. He's just loose.
A force of nature, exactly. Yeah. And that's why I liked Joker, because it was talking about Harvey Fleck.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I would appreciate him being Joker and running amok, because I was more interested in the character study. You know how I'm into that, and seeing Joker as a villain didn't really interest me as much as the journey of how he became the villain. Mm-hmm. So there's talks about them doing a Joker 2, because obviously they made $1 billion on like a $50,000 movie. So yeah, they want to try and reproduce that. But we'll see. I'm sure Joaquin has the integrity to say, no, I'm not doing this. But I guess everybody has their price.
Yeah.
So anything's possible.
Huh.
I mean, and if Todd Phillips is at the helm, maybe he can pull something off where it would be justified. But, imagine having to drop all that weight again to go back into that role. And how would they
also
do
mentally.
Yeah, mentally and physically, the strain that puts on your body. But also, how would they tie that into some sort of a universe? I mean, because we're already going ahead with Robert Pattinson. Mm-hmm. And speaking of which, I want to talk about that. Who knows anything about the Robert Pattinson, the new Batman coming up?
It's getting filmed in Scotland.
Good.
And they're making Gotham more of a gothic looking, more old timey looking, basically. But they're not and people have there's a theory out there that this is going to be based on Batman's 0 Hour storyline. It's kind of a recent story that just came out by Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder is a director, right?
Yeah, director. But I call him basically cinematographer, because I don't like his directing. I just like what he shoots.
There's a DC comic writer whose last name is also Snyder, but he writes basically all the epic Batman storylines, and 0 Hour is one of the craziest Batman storylines, and it's a retelling of his first year, and what the stills that we've seen from the shots of Robert Pattinson on the motorcycle are very similar.
Oh, I haven't seen any stills yet. That sounds exciting. Now, and what's funny, you're talking. I mean, I did read Batman Year One, which was awesome. But I also saw the graphic. Graphic novel called Gotham by Gaslight.
Yeah, and it's not going to be a Gotham by Gaslight, because that is a
steampunk.
Steampunk noir type thing.
Right.
0 Year is it's not necessarily an origin story, because I think they're definitely trying to avoid the pearls.
We're going to see pearls. They're always going to show us pearls, because they can't help themselves. Because they need to bat it over our head that he's a tortured man.
Yeah. But I don't know. I'm really excited for Pattinson to play Batman and for the guy directing the movie to be directing it, because he I forget what his name is, but I know that he directed all of the Planet of the Apes movies.
I want to say Mendes. It's not Mendes. But if you're talking about Planet of the Apes, that has a phenomenal director. But to that point, if you're going to look that up, I will say this, that Robert Pattinson has been doing enough strong independent work that I think that he can do the brooding, nuanced, protagonist. And I love the cast they're putting together. Colin Farrell is...
Matt Reeves.
Matt Reeves, thank you, yes. I mean, amazing work with Planet of the Apes. I mean, again, that was an abandoned property, but he brought it back to life. He kind of ran out of steam on the third film, but the visuals were stunning. Mm-hmm. And if he's going to be at the helm, and he's going to do practical effects with special effects, and make it as seamless as they did with Planet of the Apes, I see nothing but a win. You know what? I would love them to put together. I know it might stretch the realms of plausibility, but I would love to see Clayface in any film.
That would be something that like I really do enjoy about the newer DC movies that have been coming out, like Shazam and Wonder Woman, is that they're embracing the idea of camp, and they understand the irony of like how ridiculous like something can be. And for example, like in the new trailer of the Wonder Woman movie, she literally lassos onto a lightning bolt and then like
she's wearing this like
swing.
Crazy golden like outfit,
and they really are embracing just like this like superheroes are supposed to be like these crazy gods, not like military like figures. They're just like insanely powerful beings, and I think that's a very interesting approach to these movies. That's what they did with Shazam. That's what they did with the first Wonder Woman movie. That's what they're doing with this next one. And I like that you said that you're really into like character studies, because from what Robert Pattinson has said about this new Batman movie, it seems like it is a character study of Bruce Wayne and the idea of Batman.
And to that point, I don't know if I've ever brought this up on the cast, but in my mind, what would make Batman so much more interesting, if how to shoot Batman, would be if, imagine Batman were a dual personality, suffered from a form of mental illness where he would snap and turn into Batman, almost like the Hulk to a certain extent. What he is completely compartmentalized, where he's billionaire, Bruce Wayne, but because of this traumatic childhood, experience, he turns into, Batman, and it's almost like a Fight Club, where he would almost black out and become Batman, and then go home and then wake up and he's bruised and bloodied.
Doesn't know why he's bruised and bloody.
Or maybe he's like disconnected.
Yeah.
Like, just observing himself do this. I would think that would be...
Why are they not having you write the next Batman movie?
Exactly.
Or it could be like a werewolf thing.
Exactly. No. Well, again, I'm thinking any billionaire who, instead of hiring a security firm or reindustrializing the military, he just wants to go out physically and inflict pain. I mean, because he could hire people to solve crimes. He wants to go get bloody and beat people up, and that's catharsis for him. He's just trying to inflict pain where he received pain, and I think that's something that's compulsive. I don't think that's, a sane strategy. But again, these are comic book characters, but I would just love to see that aspect of Batman instead of, he was scared by bats and his parents are dead, so now he's a quote-unquote hero. I'd like to see somebody severely damaged running around with the cape. And to that point also, Moonlight. Is it Moonlight from the Marvel Universe?
No, you're thinking of Moon Knight.
Moonlight,
Moonlight,
yes.
I was like,
no, thank you, yeah. But that seems more interesting to me because he's supposed to be, I believe, have dual personalities. And,
yes, he's schizophrenic.
Yes, thank you. And again, I'm not trying to say that that's a heck of a niche to be mentally ill. And all people that are involved in this don't have to be mentally ill, but I just find that more intriguing than the binary, I was scared or I was, hurt, now I'm taking out vengeance. Because that's been done so many times with Spider-Man and Batman and it just seems like it's played out. I would love to see somebody who, beyond their own control, finds themselves doing these things. And they just turn out to be thought of as good or doing good deeds, but in their inner recesses of their mind, they have no choice. It's, I got to go out and fight and maybe die because that's how I'm hardwired.
Have you guys seen Flashpoint?
The cartoon?
The cartoon, I have.
Yeah, I have. It's good.
I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, because the Batman in Flashpoint is kind of like that, where it's like, because the whole, I don't want to spoil this, spoiler warning.
Yes.
In Flashpoint is that, Flash goes back in time and saves his mom, so his mom never dies, but then it shifts the entire, like, Justice League, and then Batman ends up being Bruce's dad.
Thomas Wayne.
Yeah, because Bruce got shot instead of his dad. And then he becomes this, like, shoot heavy, killing heavy, like Batman. That's
he
like,
uses the same guns that were used to kill his son, I think.
something like that.
Yeah, but he's definitely a gunslinger.
Yeah.
He wears, and it's odd that he has a Batman uniform because I don't think he was traumatized by bats. But you gotta, otherwise nobody would recognize him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he has a different, like an alternate Batman universe costume. But yeah, he uses guns.
Yeah.
He has no
regard.
regard about life. He
So
wants to
it
kill
kind
people.
of, when you said that, kind of made me think about that, how he's like, because he's like a beat up dad who's just like, I'm killing everyone,
Oh, yeah.
all that stuff.
It's like Batman with the Punisher's mindset,
Yeah.
which
yeah.
is a nice mixture of DC versus Marvel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's actually where the next Flash movie is or the actual Flash movie is gonna go.
I really hope they do that well.
With Ezra Miller?
Yeah, with Ezra Miller. And
Nice.
actually, while we're on the topic of Ezra Miller and just like this whole conversation, though, like DC hasn't done like a cinematic universe super successfully outside of like within like the DCEU, they have not done any shared universe idea very well. But like there's CW shows, they all share like they're on different Earths, but they all share like this extended universe that they like do together. And every time they had this thing called Crisis on Infinite Earths recently, and that was actually like I did not watch it, but like the idea of it and seeing all these like clips of everything going on seems very interesting. And like people that are devoted to the CW like DC shows are like really into this because one, they brought Ezra Miller from the actual DCEU into the CW show, which is like super interesting.
Yeah.
But they also have Brandon Routh, Superman from Superman Returns, playing Old Man Superman, which is super, like, that's really cool.
Yeah. I'll actually say that, it's funny you said that, I was literally going to talk about that. I love DC's TV shows. Because I watched, like, The Flash religiously, and I didn't know anything about The Flash before, but once I saw the first season, I was like, I love this. Like, he's now my favorite DC hero. Because it's just, I love the fact that he's one of those heroes where it's like, he was just a normal kid. And now he has these powers, and you can actually train to make your powers stronger. Like, he trains to become better. So I love that. As opposed to, like, boom, I got zapped with powers. I'm stronger than everyone else. I can fly. I can do all these things. And it's like, that's it, right? And then it works on character arc and development. Whereas for him, he was always a good kid. He always had the right intentions. He always thought the right way. So I love that. And then I used to watch Supergirl a lot, which was pretty good. I'm off of it now. I'm not super on that. I was never a big fan of Arrow. Never got into it.
I never got, and here's why. There's two things. One, aesthetically, and this is so nitpicky, but aesthetically, when I think of Green Arrow, I'm picturing Charles Hunnam in my mind. From Sons of Anarchy, and I just picture him with the blonde goatee, and that being my Green Arrow. Not that I had one, but that's the Green Arrow that I see in my mind. And this guy is fine. I'm sure he's well, but to me he looks like Chris O'Donnell from the Joel Schumacher Batman movies. Just a short haircut, square jaw, not really that dynamic or extreme features in any way. He just looked like a boy next door who, again, had kind of the Batman story arc where he was a billionaire, which I guess a lot of these people are, who had to go and train to become this superhero. And it's fine, but it never grabbed me. The same way that what was that series that came out on Netflix? They had there was it was Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Iron Fist, the same thing. First of all, I'm not really that big of a guy appropriating Asian culture and doing it better than anybody there. The same could be said for Doctor Strange, but I'm gonna leave that alone. I just didn't embrace this whole thing about a billionaire going off on a mission to find himself and become this super strong and martial arts skilled individual. I don't buy that, and so Green Arrow never impressed me. I did like the first season of Flash because the characters were nice, and here's the thing. I would also state that maybe because they don't have the budget for these, you know, what I call the whirling vortex of light in the sky, that these earth-ending events, they don't have the budget for that. They had to focus on their script writing and their story arcs and their characters. That's why these characters are more endearing than Justice League, because they don't have anybody writing that script. Mm-hmm. They have bullet points, and then they just film them, and then they just try and jump from one scene to another without you really caring anything. And I think that's why the CW series have such a loyal fan base, is because you have a vested interest in these characters because you actually see them. I mean, I don't really care about the Flash that much, but I know the story about him and his his sister and his family, because that's primarily where a lot of the story takes place, is in the house, in the relationships, with friendships and lost love and things like that. So you have an empathy towards them that I don't have for Superman, or Wonder Woman to a lesser extent. I got her whole thing with Steve Trevor, and they're bringing him back again. I guess because that was necessary, and I guess they're going to lose him again because that'll be necessary. And I like Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. I think that was perfect casting because Wonder Woman's from an island. And the Israeli accent from Gal Gadot, definitely hits it on the head. I do think in Wonder Woman the third act fell apart because they went all CG, and that's the same reason why Justice League I think fell apart because of the CG. I would, and I'll put this out there. Let me know your guys' thoughts. I would say the only CG that I've ever seen that actually worked and didn't totally take you out of the film was Thanos and Hulk.
Oh yeah. The fight scene in the beginning?
Well, just in general. I mean, and I'm talking Endgame with Banner Hulk.
Okay.
Yeah, and also how they used Hulk so sparingly because they didn't want to build a whole thing around it.
Yeah.
But Thanos, just in general, I mean, he's obviously all CG, but they did like a lot of the mocap, and maybe that's it. That Marvel went that extra mile and just said, let's just do a mocap.
Yeah.
So you still get the body movements that are natural and the facial expressions.
I would say that most of Marvel's, you think about Guardians, there's a lot of CG in Guardians.
There is.
They do that pretty well.
There is, especially with Rocket.
Yeah.
Because Rocket's...
He's got a lot of expressions.
Yeah, but now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Groot actually had Vin Diesel on stilts. But obviously not for a lot of the action scenes. But when I'm thinking of Wonder Woman, and they had, what was it?
Ares,
the God of War. It was again 1990s CG.
Yeah.
The only way to really make that is either you have to have an amazing special effects team, or just do a really good mocap. Because the eye always spots that uncanny valley, kind of a dead-eyed thing, which is also why I think that everybody was kind of ragging on Star Wars and the Princess Leia. And actually, you can go online and see where they do deep fake, and they put a Carrie Fisher's face over that scene, and it looks 100% better.
Oh, wow.
It's because they're trying to, they have this software where they think, oh yeah, this was good enough, and they just shove it into the scene. Whereas something that's 1/10 the price, or probably 1/100th of the price, some guy's doing on his home computer and blows it out of the water.
Yeah.
So I think again, it's not how much money can we spend on special effects. It's how well can we do this with the budget we have. And a lot of great films are made because they have to use their skill as opposed to their budget. I would say Joker's in that line. I would say Iron Man is in that line. And tell me what you think about this. I had a theory that the reason Iron Man succeeded where any of these other CG films would have failed is because Iron Man had no features. It was literally just an iron suit, which back in those days you could pull off.
It was a voice inflection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can have an iron suit running around doing anything because there's no clothing, there's no fluid movement. It's literally just like a polygon, effect.
Yeah, and like part of that is that like it's a lot of practical effect there because Iron Man in the first Iron Man movie is literally a suit that took Robert Downey Jr. like 8 hours to put on.
The metal suit.
The metal suit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like, what they're doing most of the times in that movie, like maybe when he's like fighting that tank, that's probably CGI, but when he's getting like lifted into the air, like they rely heavily on like a strong set and practical set, and the effects of him like boosting off of the ground, or he's actually like they have a wire attached to him like boosting off of the ground, and they have like real practical effects going. And I do agree that like Marvel does do the CGI a little bit better, but that's one of my issues with these movies too, is that like they are just like bogged down in so much CGI. Like rewatching that like battle between in Wakanda, between that it's just like a whole mess of just like a bunch of CGI going on, and it's weird. And so my counter to that is what they do with Spider-Man Homecoming. It is sparingly in CGI. A lot of it is just shot with like Tom Holland in his Spider-Man suit like actually doing stuff, and a lot of it seems, or at least feels like, it's practical.
Well, and one of the most endearing scenes was when he got stuck in that hangar.
Yeah, and
it's him hanging out on a web hammock, talking to his AI, which was played by Jennifer Connelly, who is married to the guy who does the voice for Vision.
Bettany.
Paul Bettany. Yeah. So little trivia there for you. And I would say, again, I'm not trying to blow up the internet, but Black Panther, for all of its, groundbreaking casting and good story arc and good villains, was a little wonky with their CG. I had a lot of issues with the fighting down on the train track.
Yeah.
Well, did you hear about that?
No, what?
They only had a few weeks to do that.
Well, then that's just bad planning.
Yeah. Well, they were talking about how they were given, the CG group was given that film with like 2 to 3 weeks to do it.
Yeah, that's a bad production. Yeah. And when I see the, because again, when you see Winter Soldier, which had very almost sparingly, if any, special effects, a lot of wire work, a lot of just stunt coordination, some blue screen, of course. But at the end of the day, and I go back to this, scientifically plausible movement. It's grounded within the realms of physics. And when you see Black Panther wrestling a rhino to the ground, and the rhino looks like a video game from the 90s. Yeah. And again, it's to that point, but now that makes perfect sense that they didn't have a good timeline, or because it looked like and I'm going to go back in time. Remember when they had that horrible origins of Wolverine? And it was it leaked footage before it even came out, and it was like this roughly rendered CG just for placement. Yeah, that's what I felt this looked like.
One of the most egregious scenes from that movie is when that old family invites him into the house, and he's upstairs in the bathroom
Oh, those bad claws.
Yeah, he was they were the CGI fake claws, and there's
sparks.
Fake sparks coming off of it. Boy,
that was pretty
well.
cool.
And also when he was riding the motorcycle and he used his claws to flip.
Yeah.
I do remember that. That was terrible.
Yeah,
Jesus.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you guys this. Okay, so we're obviously all in agreement with Marvel being one of the more superior groups. What is the one thing you would say that DC needs to do to change the game for them?
They need to find themselves a Kevin Feige, for sure.
Okay.
So, can I just say one more issue that I have with the Marvel movies, and this is it goes through every single Marvel movie, but every single one of their movie posters sucks so bad. Thor Ragnarok, it's just Thor in a yellow background. Black Panther is just in a silver background. Doctor Strange is also just in the same silver background as...
To be fair, I don't think these are... Well, right now we're looking at posters on Google when we look up all the Marvel movies. I think these are actual just...
I think these are the covers of the movie itself.
I think these are just thumbnails for the movie, not promotional posters.
All right. Sure, we're looking at those, but even the Far From Home picture and the Spider-Man Homecoming, those both
Yeah.
suck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're actually absolutely right. My favorite poster is actually Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse
Yeah, no,
with
that
him
is really
falling
good.
down upside down.
Mhm.
That's actually one of my favorites.
And you know what? To that point, I 100% agree. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which we didn't even talk about. Sony, again, you talk about lightning in a bottle.
Mhm.
I think it's working within a certain confine that you just excel at. You don't try to do something larger. And I think why this was a success is because it's not, first of all, nobody had an opinion.
There's
on
no
Miles
expectations.
Morales.
Yeah.
No expectations, gives you nothing but opportunity.
I
And-
literally went to watch a movie because I was like, oh, it's Spider-Man.
And this is, in my mind, probably definitely top 2 of all the Spider-Man films put together. And I will say that the poster's probably good because it's probably the same digital team that made the movie to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, they have all the stills and
true.
all the images. The other ones they always farm out to poster places, just like they farm them out to trailer parks to do the trailer production. But you're right. A lot of these posters nowadays, they're based off of a lot of what you would call strategic marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Avengers, you can see 20 other ensemble action things that look exactly like. And there's actually a chart you can see online where it's supposed to be in a triangle or a geometric pattern where it draws you in to the primary
I
characters.
was going to say, even I don't even like the Endgame poster. It's just so.
Yeah.
It,
I definitely don't think these are the actual posters. I have to look them up.
Yeah, some of them are. And again, I'm a big poster fan because I like the art that goes into it. But I'm more into the minimal. But then again, it depends on what you're going to see. If you're going to see spectacle, then you're going to want to see all the characters that you love, and it's going to push that in your face. But say, for example, the Logan posters. Those are usually just single shots of Logan, shot in a sepia tone, so you get that weathered feeling. And I would say the Spider-Man, again, because there's different characters in it, but to me those are the best ones because you're not mixing up CG with.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Yeah,
Even the actual Infinity War poster.
We're
is
looking
not
at
that
the
good.
Infinity War poster, and
Yeah.
and again, if you look at any of these Avengers posters, you'll probably see where they're geometrically patterned. There's a balance to them.
It's
and it always
almost the same. Like
exactly, the
Endgame
layout's the
poster and
same.
Infinity War poster, basically like the same layout idea.
Yeah, it's very much like, hey, this is the team. Like
Yeah.
they want to have everyone on the poster. You're right.
Which is good, and again, to an extent, Star Wars did that, and before them, a lot of these other, sci-fi adventure films did that. But again, it's promotional, so it's not the art that it used to be. They're not hand painted. These are all photoshopped together. So sometimes they're literally creating these scenes that never even existed. So that's why they look a little wonky. And when you zoom in on them, you can see those aren't photos of scenes or even paintings of scenes. They're photoshopped.
Well, some of these DC posters aren't bad.
Which ones are we looking at?
DC posters?
Okay,
like
yes.
Shazam's poster is pretty good.
Yeah,
Shazam's not bad.
Shazam's poster is pretty cool.
And again, the Batman v Superman was not bad.
The poster is not bad. The movie sucked.
Yes,
but, yeah.
exactly.
I don't think that's Wonder Woman's poster.
And again, there's
Because I have that movie and I have the poster. No, it's this one.
What I'll do is on the Binge Theory website, I'll put up a lot of these posters for review, and we can rate them and give our thoughts on
Yeah, we can do that.
how good they are, and I think that'll be an interesting look into what we value regarding art versus marketing.
Yeah, that's true.
And how they come together. Sometimes they both come together and it's perfect, and sometimes, like say for example, Deadpool, the poster we're looking at, where it's just a close up of Deadpool's face. That's perfect because it's simple, it's minimal. You get the theme of that's Deadpool. He's not like he's doing anything zany or in an action scene, and except for Deadpool 2.
Yeah.
That one I'd like less because I get it. There's characters you're trying to show,
Yeah.
but I'm more of a minimalist. I like even to a certain extent Venom. The Venom one where you have half of Venom's face, half of Tom Holland's face.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but it's so Photoshop.
Yeah.
Just like the movie, it was so Photoshop.
Well, let's do this. 'Cause I know we're kind of wrapping up here.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's start with Marvel. Name one Marvel movie if you have to watch it. You recommend it this year for people to watch. that you've seen?
That is a good one.
What's the one Marvel movie you'd recommend people need to watch?
I would say, for me, especially, is Thor Ragnarok. It is...
Dang, it's just
I just feel like it doesn't follow the same formula that any like even Spider-Man: Homecoming, like a movie that I think is extremely different from all the other Marvel movies. I think Thor Ragnarok is the most unique of them all. It truly just breaks the weird like formula that Marvel has set up for each of their movies and completely turns it on its head and turns Thor into a comedy instead of a very serious, weirdly dark, elfsy movie.
It embraces the weirdness.
Yeah.
It embraces the absurdity.
How about you, Julian?
And that was my original one, but I got a couple in the rear. So I would say, if Marvel-wise, and it didn't come out recently, but it's still one of my all-time faves, is Winter Soldier.
Oh, dang it. That was my second one. All right, cool. This is great.
And again, Winter Soldier, just, the quick summary is it has so many good points to it. I mean, it has a great storyline, and the action scenes are some of the best ones ever. Again, because they're grounded in reality. There's that iconic elevator fight scene. There's the fight scene on the highway where Black Widow has to jump off to avoid an explosion, throws a grappling hook, and then hits the ground running full stride. Mm-hmm. And it looks seamless, and it obviously it's a lot of blue screen and wire work, but it does not look fake. And that's what, it doesn't remove me from the enjoyment of the film, because I'm watching it and I'm believing what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. And especially when he's getting shot at by a minigun and, he has the shield and he basically is deflecting the bullets as like a countermeasure. Mm-hmm. Loved it. Mm-hmm. Loved it. And, I can't recommend that enough. I think, if you're a fan of spy / action / just good acting overall, mm-hmm. that's one of my faves. But hopefully I left you with some other ones.
No, it's good. Those are definitely my favorites, so that's awesome. I would say if it's your first time watching any Marvel movie ever, I would definitely say Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's a really great intro into like a standalone movie on its own. If you're already huge into the Marvel Universe and you want to see something that's really, really awesome, I definitely say Spider-Man Far From Home, because you guys took my others, so I can't really say the same thing.
I was gonna, if you went first, I was gonna let you have
Winter Soldier. Thank
and
you.
I was gonna go Spider-Verse.
Oh, okay.
Because
okay.
I agree. And again, Spider-Verse completely isolated from the whole
mm-hmm.
MCU, and I think that's what gives it that unique quality. Mm-hmm. And you just love the characters, mm-hmm. and you love Miles Morales. And again, I thought it was just a new style on animation, mm-hmm. which it took it to the next level, because there's so many good animated films, but they follow a certain pattern, and we expect to see that. But them using this whole new style of, comic book / slick graphics, mm-hmm. and a great soundtrack too.
Yeah.
It was hitting on all cylinders. Yeah. So that is definitely a good pick.
How about DC?
Ooh.
What would you recommend for DC?
Well, okay, we're talking everything in DC, mm-hmm. or okay, well. Then I will say, because again, I was a big fan of Joker. Uh-huh. I would say that, mine is, and if we're gonna go, I would say Joker #1 and Dark Knight #2. Those are two different types of films, okay. Two different Jokers, but again, they're both grounded in reality. The only reason why I like Joker a little bit more is because it was more introspective, where Dark Knight was all external. It was mm-hmm. just circumstances and things like that. But the extra mile that Joaquin went to give you an inside view of this madness versus Batman just fighting a villain, mm-hmm. it edges it out for me. But mm-hmm. both, I think, are phenomenal. I'm really into the grounded level. Matter of fact, all of the ones I mentioned, except for the comic book, mm-hmm. The completely animated one, mm-hmm. are all ground level, because I like mm-hmm. that plausibility of physics. I don't like that whirling vortex of light, or the CG monster that you have to hit really hard. Mm-hmm. Thanos aside, and nobody really beat him up. Mm-hmm. They just made him go away.
Yeah.
So except for the Thor hammer, that was pretty baller. Yeah. When Captain America got Thor's hammer, that was baller. Yeah. But that aside, these big CG monsters, you can't really beat them up.
Yeah.
You know, they're overpowered.
Absolutely. I would say, I would have said Dark Knight also, so that's great. If I was to look at the DCEU, I would definitely say either Shazam or Wonder Woman, but I definitely think I'd go Wonder Woman because it's so different. It's just such, in my opinion, Wonder Woman is going to be DCEU's Iron Man. Like, they're really going to harp on this, and they've got a really great cast selection with Gal Gadot. I mean, she is a phenomenal Wonder Woman. And I remember one of my favorite scenes from Wonder Woman is her outfit reveal, which not many superhero movies have done great outfit reveals. But hers, do you remember when she walked onto the battlefield for the first time?
Yes.
In quote-unquote no man's land?
Yes.
So I was like, wow, this is like the best reveal. The soundtrack is incredible. So I definitely would say Wonder Woman. If it comes to the TV series, I definitely say The Flash. You should definitely check out The Flash. But I wanted to ask you, because I know we kind of talked a little bit about it. The Oscars, the nominations just came up. What's one of the nominations that you're most excited to see, and what do you think that it's definitely deserving of?
Well, it's funny, and there's such a list of different things to go down, but going just based off best film, and ironically, I'm a big fan of Joker, and that pulled 11 Oscar nominations. I think that's a little overkill. I think that's more based on the fact that it was so successful as opposed to the quality of the film. Again, obviously, I love the film, but I don't think it deserved 11 Oscars. I love the soundtrack, because that had an amazing score, and Joaquin did an interpretive dance that really made that more profound. One of the films that I liked, and what's funny is I'm not really 100% sure if this is even nominated, but I did like Little Women, and that's one I'm really excited to see that because I like the cast. Emma Watson, who I haven't seen for a while, but she did a good job. Saoirse Ronan, and the one of the sisters is and I forget her name. It's her last name is Plo. And she's having a moment right now. You will see her as the sister in Black Widow. She was the main character in Fighting With My Family, and she was in Midsommar as the main character in that. And she plays the sister in this one remarkably well. She has a great range, and I just think she's going to be one of the new young actors to take Hollywood by storm. I think she's going to be in a lot of things. Hopefully they don't overutilize her, but I'm really interested to see what Joker pulls off, given the subject matter, given that it's a comic book movie, and just because Todd Phillips did not give the best marketing when he was doing. He wasn't really aware that a film about murder could be detrimental to society. I'm not saying that it would be, but he was just oblivious to it and didn't have an answer for that when people asked him that. So. But at the end of the day, I'm really curious to see it. I'm just wondering how many of those nominations it'll pull. I'm going to go ahead and say maybe 4 out of the 11.
Okay.
Because I definitely like the wardrobe. I definitely like the score, and obviously it may be hard, but I'm going to see if Joaquin can pull off best actor, best lead actor. That's if he can pull that off.
As far as movies, he was. Phenomenal. I remember when we came out of the movie, I told you, I was like, Joaquin killed that role. Like, that was incredible. And it goes back to what Tam was saying earlier about how it was a film. It wasn't like a Marvel experience. Like, this is a superhero movie or a hero movie.
Like Christopher Nolan. Those I would call those films, even though they're super. And again, like and also Wolverine. I would say so. And I'm a big fan of films, but sometimes you need a big dumb movie. Anyway. No, this is great. This is great subject matter, and like I said, on the website we'll go ahead and put up all the posters, and we can just score them, seeing which ones we like, and maybe leave a note as to why. But anyway, everybody, thanks for listening. We love bringing this content to you, and next time we'll come up with some new topics. And remember, if it's worthwhile, it's worth binging.